Welcome, wanderer of worlds. I have stories to whisk you off to distant places or to sleep. So sit and listen. My name is Arkisto, and I am the head archivist on the ancient archive. Oh, excuse me. I take for granted that everyone in the universe knows about the ancient archive. I come from the future, where the idea of archiving dead planets is as commonplace as the concept of gravity. Everyone knows of it, but I seem to have traveled so far into the past that I've landed in a time that predates the largest and most complete repository of archived information ever compiled. You see, when an intelligent species dies off, my people, as archivists, preserve its planet to capture it in a moment of how it was, perfectly maintained in its entirety, suspended in the web of time for all to gaze upon forever. We catalog everything from the flora and fauna and landscape formations to the languages and tools and social tendencies of the dominant native species. And we organize and store those memories here in the ancient archive, in this quiet corner of time that stretches to the edges of dream and memory and eternal existence. As head archivist, I oversee the oldest collection of knowledge in the known universe. Older than most stars that still fling their light into the void of space. Older than most arrangements of solar systems and collections of galaxies. Older than the incessant suck of the black holes that speckle the horizon across space and time. And I have come back to this moment, into the past, simply to share my experiences and to help you rest. So I will tell you stories, not simply to entertain you, but to let your mind drift, untethered, unhindered, free to waft around my tired head for a while, to let the heaviness of my memories pull you down to sleep, while I unspool the near-forgotten threads of the universe. Oh, you're curious about the ancient archive? Well, my intention was to share my first experience traveling to a dead planet, what it was like to dig my fingers into its tendrils and freeze an entire world in an instant. But I can't say I blame you. Very well, Wanderer. Let me tell you about this old, quiet place I call home. The ancient archive hums its usual hum. Can you hear that? Far-off reactors spark and spit in protest as they churn power to this and that. The twist of the epic space station's central axis adds a dull and persistent grinding that almost syncs with the beeps and buzzes of active preservation fields. The fields that keep the universe's belongings safe from decay. The hustle of androids and the bustle of humans percuss the melody of the station with clinking grasp modules and echoing footfalls through the preservation chambers. And it all mingles together in a half-mechanized drone that I've come to associate with home and comfort and familiarity. It vibrates my bones and tightens my skin into tingles each morning when I step out of my sleeping quarters and into the low rumble of professional guardianship. And it never, never, never gets old. Somewhere in the distance, servo motors speed along in desperation to keep up with the upkeep tasks, and the motors add to the mechanical murmur. Each morning I pass by the open vaults, the physical volumes full of some of the oldest records of the universe, and their pages seem to jitter with excitement, as if waiting for their turn to be opened and consumed. The characters of their stories from long ago, desperate to be remembered once more. Time-worn artifacts from species here and gone clunk back into place as the service androids dust and sweep and keep the precious stock neat and ever organized. Trinkets from lost civilizations tink. Artwork from others flap into the Rollo archives, and the sound of tireless maintenance drifts into and out of the whir like strands on an endlessly busy loom. It is the epic sound of history, boisterous and bold and perfect. Around some central axis are the preservation rooms in which I do my busiest work. The other archivists and I take spore prints, restore decrepit artwork, create lexicons and syntactical structures to ensure the lost languages of dead civilizations are rememberable. The rooms are filled with what we call archive caches. They allow for mass storage in small spaces, important when you're storing billions of archived planets. The contents are always accessible, ready to be extracted and displayed in their original format, or some dimensional representation for ease of handling. I could take you around sometime, show you the would-be mysteries of species long ago, of worlds otherwise forgotten. What's that? You want to know if your planet is among those that have been archived in the future? Interesting question, Wanderer. I can tell you that all planets shrivel up like overripened fruit left to rot on the vine. It's the way of the universe. But species can transcend, inhabit new places, persist. But I cannot tell you of your particular planet's fate. It's against the law of the archive. No. I'm not in the business of writing laws, Wanderer. That would fall under the responsibilities of the Warden. Who is the Warden, you ask? Why, he oversees the entirety of the ancient archives, and all of the archivists and android workers, and all of the universe's belongings. The Warden rules over it and ensures the persistence of it all. What's that? Oh yes, of course. I've met him. You underestimate the importance of my position, I think. Let me tell you about my encounter, yes? The first time I was ever called into the Warden's office. The hallway leading to the room is underwhelming, like a shrug of the shoulder of the station at large. But the door is as spectacular as the universe itself, a Mont Blanc of genuine wood. I trust you know what wood is, but in the future there isn't much of it. I've seen my fair share of the stuff, having poshed through and organized and helped to preserve hundreds of civilizations, many of which at some point used wood in their art or architecture or some other facet of their lives. Anyway, the door to the Warden's office is marvelously large, with more knots and grain patterns carved into a deep texture from centuries of wear than I've ever seen sprawling across some speck of wood-preserved history. The center is buckled with imprinted steel, and massive handles on chains hang down and dare to be leveraged. The thing dominates the hallway and makes even the giant vault doors that are made for easy bulk loading and unloading look like pinpricks in the industrial walls. The room behind it is even more imposing than the door. The walls tower over the room, almost as if it had once been the main congregation room of an ancient citadel, wrought ever upward by old-world prayers and hymns. They instantly draw your attention upward to the massive chandelier that hangs over the Warden's desk on the opposite side of the room. The dangling fixture is cradled by a Duomo, and it's a rare artifact from the Gemini species. It was grown rather than constructed, as most of the Gemini structures were, with tree-like branches that were garnished with hanging bioluminescent crystal organisms, like drips of stardust fossilized in the pull of gravity. They glitter and fill the far side of the office with a dim blue glow that is as otherworldly and alien as it is powerfully soothing. Powerfully soothing, powerfully soothing, powerfully soothing, powerfully soothing. Up in the higher reaches of the Duomo, the warden has artwork clinging to the walls as they curve inward on themselves, the progression of tilted frames like a microcosm of textiles from around the universe. Upon first sight, my eyes flicked around the frames before they even shifted to take in the artwork they held, marveling at the materials I didn't quite recognize. I could feel nervousness erupt in my face, like the heat from my core expanded out its empire and reddened the skin pulled over my cheekbones. What would the warden think if he knew that I, head archivist of the ancient archive, didn't recognize something as broad-stroked as a material used for frame construction? What would he think, indeed? But it was no matter. No archivist is perfect. I knew that. The warden knew that. I dared to let my eyes wander over the canvases the frames held, unsure what I might think of myself if I couldn't place them in space or time, but worried more about what it would mean if I avoided them altogether. As an archivist, I am, at my core, curious, after all. But before I could get a good look, I heard the punctuation of a throat clearing behind me, and until the interruption made me jump and twist my head, I hadn't realized how utterly quiet it had seemed in the room. The warden is surprisingly unassuming, almost like he might just disappear into a passing shadow at any moment and be gone from the universe forever, plucked from his own existence. Maybe it was the layers of robes that hid his slight figure, or his long, knobby, ink-stained fingers that clutched together in front of him, suggesting that he might just as easily get lost in a book or an archive or some other similar and non-menacing enterprise. At the same time, he was far more intimidating than I had ever imagined. The robes glimmered like puffs of ash in their coalescing, which shone like opulence and fervor. Those inky fingers spindled and clicked their nails together like the legs of a mortalis arachnid, the thought of which still sends a shock of electricity up my spine. despite years having passed since I saw one in Vault 8832. But that is a story for another night, Wanderer. The warden's head was bald, and time-battered tattoos left his scalp looking as stained as his fingers. He wore glasses, with lenses that looked entirely opaque. But after a second of gawking at them, I realized they were just so magnified that they showed an outsider only the blacks of his eyes, identifiable only by the flickers and glimmers that jumped around as he shifted his gaze. He said my name, Arkisto, and it felt like home in his voice, like we had long been friends and were reconnecting after a sour absence. He moved around the room like he was floating rather than walking, his legs hidden by the hang of the cloak that seemed as terrified as I was by his nearby presence. Unwilling even to bend to the push of his knee or the sway of movement. He sat in the chair behind his broad desk, which I only then noticed was covered in trinkets and a complete kit of archivist observational tools splayed out around some pill-shaped metallic thing, which seemed to be hovering a few inches above the desk's surface. Curious thing, almost certainly from east of the Anodyne Galaxy, but that too is a story for another night, Wanderer. Anyway, that's all I have time for tonight, friend. I must get back to my work, for I have many more hours of archiving ahead of me. But you must sleep now. Feel free to drift off right here. I can work in silence while you rest. Let the distant sounds of my tinkering carry you to sleep, and when you wake, trust that there will be another story waiting. Another world, another memory, another story. But for now, close your eyes.